Hello, and welcome to Yoga Chat with Nikki, the podcast that explores the practice of yoga and life beyond the practice. And now for your host, Nikki Estrada.
Today's topic is yoga, stress, and anxiety. Big topic. Stress is a huge epidemic right now. So Jonathan's here. Will you introduce yourself and tell us about your credentials and the work you're doing with stress and anxiety?
Sure. So my name is Jonathan Pofsky. You guys know that. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been a student of yoga for over 20 years now. I've been teaching for a little over 10 years. I did my first teacher training with Nikki. It was Nikki's first teacher training, so
Yes.
This is a big kind of full circle coming back.
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, it is.
Yeah. And I also do a lot of work talking in the community about stress and anxiety. I've done mindfulness work in the schools, in elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. Side note, I've been a body worker also for 20 years, so I'm very familiar with the mind-body in terms of how it works together in lots of different ways. So my business is called the Marin Stress Anxiety Center. That's where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
So I work with preteens, teens, individuals, couples, and I bring yoga into this office here. And we do some therapeutic yoga to work with stress and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Not every client do we do that with, but
Depending on the needs.
depending on the needs, yeah, but a lot we do.
So, as I said when we opened, stress has become like a massive, at least in our country,
Mhm.
epidemic. It's translating into people not being able to sleep well. We're seeing more and more children in school incredibly stressed. I'm not up on all the latest research, but I know that we used to think that cholesterol and diet was like the number one issue when it comes to heart attacks and heart issues. But we're now actually finding that the number one factor is stress, that we're all living under, the sympathetic nervous system, the fight and flight, and it's taking its toll on our bodies. Our bodies weren't really designed to deal with that constantly.
Constantly is the key word.
Yeah. It's kind of like we're all under the gun all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, in your work, first of all, where are you seeing it mostly? How are you seeing it show up? And tell us some of the specific yoga techniques that you're finding are the most effective. How do you weave that in?
Okay, those are two big and different questions.
Yes,
So let's field the first one, which is, what am I seeing? When you say that you specialize in something like this, generally when I have conversations with people, they go, a stress and anxiety center. And the first thing they always say is, you must be really busy.
Yeah.
Same every time.
Right.
It's as predictable as anything. And I say, yeah, I am. Because it is pervasive right now, and I think that is a key word. And it kind of, stress and anxiety just gets grouped into just this overall feeling of agitation, malaise, overwhelm that so many of us feel at this kind of pace of life, especially here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, in the Bay Area.
Maybe different in rural life.
Yeah.
But a lot of what I'm seeing is, especially in middle school, high school, and young adults, again, pervasive. There's a feeling of not being safe, not feeling safe.
Wow.
And there have been surveys done in the school systems, and they have made a very clear correlation. The number one indicator for drug and alcohol use is stress and anxiety. So my services have been called upon to do talks in the schools because of that. They understand it's such a big issue. And what I bring to them is not a laundry list of, okay, here's all these things you can do for your kids, or that you're going to give to your kids to do, because
that's going to add to the stress and anxiety.
As a parent, trying to get your kids to do anything can be painstaking. So really what I do is I offer parents in these situations that I'm talking about tools to work with themselves and to model their path for their kids.
So wait, I want to go back to one thing.
Yeah.
What is do you know, what is the source of not feeling safe? Is it that the environment that they're in is negative? Is it that they don't feel supported in who they are as a person? Is it that there's so much pressure at school to succeed? What is the source of this feeling of not being safe? Is it, I mean, we're now...
It's a good question.
We now have all the, you know, ridiculous shootings that are going on around, right, in schools and public, you know, venues.
That's right.
So what do you think? Do you have a...
That's one thing. You know, what's happening in the world, in the news, and of course what's showing up in social media, and the way that the kids use that is one big piece. I had a call this week. You know, my daughter is having problems after the Paris attacks and San Bernardino attacks. You know, can she come see you? So that's very clear, you know, based on what you're talking about.
Yeah, a physical safety issue.
But in a lot of cases, you know, it's not even about what's happening always in the family. You know, sometimes there's divorce, sometimes there's issues with the parents, and that comes up.
Right.
But in a lot of cases, they're very supported by their families. It's, I think, just generally the social interactions,
societal,
and this feeling of not enoughness that comes up, and social media generally serves to kind of support this as this kind of comparing mind comes up, and so this we'll bring this back to yoga in a few moments. This whole idea of what do I do with my mind, right?
Right.
Knowing that it naturally goes towards this place of identifying with an ego, comparing what I have to what you have, how it looks, what you think of me.
We see that perfect photo on
That's right.
Instagram.
That's right.
That may or may not have been doctored.
That's
and
right.
I make all these assumptions that, wow, that gal has her stuff together. Boy, I don't. I feel bad about myself, or I just got a C on that test, or whatever it is, right?
That's right.
My parents don't have the Mercedes that, you know, the other parents have, or whatever it might be.
This is very human.
Yes.
This is not just the Bay Area. This happens with all people.
That compares.
And as yogis, we also are looking to manage that ourselves.
Right.
Has there been studies like in a culture, like an Amish culture, where stuff is not so prevalent?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure I have the answer for that in terms of specific research, but I think we can maybe look at that today and see.
But we can assume that, you know, in a suburban, urban area, you know, and in the modern world that we're living in, there sure is a lot of emphasis on the external things, right? And then yoga comes in as, wait a minute, an internal process, right? I mean, if you look to the key issue, according to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it's that we misidentify who we are. I am a good person if I make this much money, or I can feel okay about myself if I have this thing, or if I just achieve that in my career, then I'll feel good.
Avidya.
Yes.
Right.
And if you're not identifying with that source on the inside, if your practices aren't guiding you towards that true identification, you're going to get yourself into trouble, because those things are always changing. They're never a guarantee. They are, the guarantee is the change, right?
Well, if avidya is not seeing clearly, which is what that means, then what to do about it and how yoga can serve us is to help us see clearly. And that is a path in and of itself. Before we just go down that road, because that is something I think we're going to open up in just a moment. Also mention that, because we're just talking about kids, that adults are coming in basically with some of the same things. This idea, am I enough? Also, am I going to be okay? Right? Because anxiety says this, right? It says there's some idea about the future that things aren't going to work out, right? There's some fear-focused, future-focused, imagined negative outcome. It could be anything, or it could be just ambiguous. I don't even know what that negative outcome is, but I know it's there.
And I don't have an answer for it, so it is producing this anxiety.
And that anxiety triggers that sympathetic nervous system. So it triggers the stress response, and off we go.
Right.
So it's a very interesting look at this way in which we're not here. We're always projecting ourselves in some other place, either remembering in the past, this didn't work out, or I wasn't enough then, I'm not enough now, or I'm not going to have enough in the future, or something's not going to work out for me. So anything but here.
Right.
Which is the only place, as we know, that yoga happens.
Right, is in the moment. Yeah.
Have either of you entered a practice, and I mean a specific practice, like a day with a lot of anxiety, and at the end of the hour and a half of asanas, you're at a place of peace?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've spoken in other podcasts about the fact that I was having quite a bit of anxiety. Not diagnosed technically, but now at the time I couldn't even describe it. I wouldn't have said, I have anxiety, but I did. And I would go to yoga, and it would just, and now I understand sympathetic nervous system to parasympathetic nervous system. But yeah, just feeling like literally heart palpitations, anxious, uncomfortable, concern, instability. And then you go to yoga and you're guided into this other state, and by the end, wow, everything's okay.
I have another question before I forget, because you just brought it up again. At the beginning when you were talking about anxiety, one of the descriptives you used was malaise. And everything like Nikki was just describing is high energy, fast beating. Malaise in my mind is very slow, depressive.
And it can get that way because when we are so overcharged, right, we're in sympathetic hyperarousal, then what happens eventually is there's some kind of crash. I can't maintain that.
Right. Your
and
body
it's not that I come back
designed.
to center, but I get flooded with all these stress hormones, and then I kind of go down a bit, and I may feel bad about myself that I couldn't go out to that party because I, had so much going on in my own head I couldn't leave the house, right? Or I was afraid to ask for a raise, and so I just settle for what I feel like I'm, not worth.
So from a clinical perspective, is a state of depression from that still diagnosed as an anxiety stress?
So it's a good question, right? But there can be depression also with some symptoms of anxiety, but depression being the kind of first and foremost piece, right? They qualify for more of those symptoms. There's also anxiety, right, with some depressive symptoms. So it's just
complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated, but it's just kind of looking at lists of symptoms and seeing how we kind of meet that and what seems to be the greater of the experiences. But sometimes even in other situations, like there's a particular disorder called adjustment disorder. Something happens in our life, some transition, we have a hard time with it, and one of the qualifiers is with mixed depression and anxiety, right? One's just with anxiety, one's just with depression, so it just depends. They're certainly interrelated, and yoga can successfully work with both of them in a lot of ways. Again, not as the only thing.
Right.
And I think
but
this is one
tool.
key thing to say here is that bringing together psychological work and yoga is really powerful.
Well, that was actually my personal path. I was practicing yoga, so I would get that relief from the anxiety. I could see more clearly, right? I could tap into something much deeper and more clear. But I got myself into therapy, and it was almost a yoga in and of itself to begin to see more clearly the nature of relationships, the nature of my history. Kind of going back to something you said, I can remember thinking, what is wrong with me? Why?
Yeah, there it is.
Why am I having this?
What's wrong with me?
What is wrong with me?
It's the golden question.
Right? Something is inherently like, this is not normal. And, my therapist chuckled and was kind of like, well, why wouldn't you be having anxiety based upon the things you've told me about your history?
Right.
But there's that like shut off mechanism.
That's right.
And you think, okay, something's inherently wrong with me.
And everyone who walks in my office, that's there. And that is a really important point. And actually the last two words are the biggest point. What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? There is some identification we have with I, with me, with mine. Those are my thoughts, my emotions. Right? So we're getting into what we call asmita, which is one of the kleshas. Right? This idea of this egoic feeling that things revolve around me and I and who I think that is.
Right.
Right? So yoga is this ability to step in to our breath and movement in the body and to unify that together. And in that moment, I'm not really
All
so
those other
concerned
things.
with me and mine.
Yeah.
And I get to just be the observer to thoughts, feelings, sensations.
Experiences.
They don't have to be my thoughts, my feelings.
Yes.
Which also gets us into all these things, right? You know, my downward facing dog's not good enough, or my handstand. And what are we invested in? Are we just bringing all of the things that that make us suffer into our yoga practice?
And most people are doing that, right? Unless they're able to start to access some tools and some awareness about the deeper intentions of yoga.
Let me ask you as teachers, what is your goal for the students in your classroom? And by that I mean, are you teaching a physical pose? Are you teaching an asana with the underlying hope that this person's going to transform their energy and be more at a place of peace?
I'll let you answer it first, Jonathan.
Sure. I think the way I teach has transformed over the years as my own internal process has changed and my understanding of all these things have evolved. But when I'm teaching, I want my students to see their true self in some way, to feel that that's possible. And so when I'm teaching, I'm inviting them into the present moment. I'm inviting them into the sense of self-observation as well, not to be analytical, but to just simply observe what is without judgment, mindfulness, right? To be mindful of what's happening and to really listen, not just to me, but to themselves, right? Can they work on regulating, on managing their breath and sensations? Is something becoming unmanageable, but they're doing it anyway because I'm telling them to do it, right? So I always just say that I'm there as a guide, but the bigger guide is within them, right? So if they're just using me as a guide, but kind of passing over their own inner guide, then something's not right. So ideally, the hope is that when we create the right conditions, right, all of these kind of false identities just kind of drop away, and all that's left is, let's say, who we are.
What keeps coming to mind is right now at Yoga Works in Mill Valley, they're doing work on the building. And so the environment of practicing yoga is transformed into a loud, noisy place. And what I keep thinking of is what our practice should be is to practice, be at peace in the midst of the chaos. But I think from what I've observed, at least at the beginning, so many people want to change the environment. Can they stop working? Can we go to a different room? And I think part for me, my inner struggle, my challenge, like you said, to know who you are, your own inner guru. Sometimes that voice is yelling at me, tell them to shut up. But in my place of peace, it's like, oh, look, my mind is yelling to...
But, sometimes life is a bit of a negotiation, and it's that ability to know what really is the right choice in that moment. Sometimes life is asking us to step up and say, no, that isn't okay. I do need to handle this situation that's unfolding. And sometimes it's an opportunity, okay, can I get very centered and quiet, and can I do the practice despite what's happening? Because guess what? It's never going to be perfect on the outside, and there's all these things we can't
If only
control.
this, then I could be peaceful.
Exactly.
If only my kids weren't screaming, then I wouldn't be stressed out.
Right.
And sometimes we just have to work on, the work is finding that, can we stay centered? Or at least if I have this intention about how I'd like to be, can I at least keep working with that intention, stay connected to it, even though I may hear that voice of going, oh, this sucks. I wish it was different.
Right.
I wish only it was quieter. But
it is what it is. But it's
notice that
not an
voice.
excuse.
Yeah.
It's not an excuse to not take action in life.
That's right.
It's not an excuse to not take action.
I don't know.
So it's that balance of checking in.
Mm-hmm.
What is right? What is right in this moment for me? What is the right answer? Only kind of you saying that you're the guide to direct it to that
Mm-hmm.
individual to make those choices, because we all ultimately have to take responsibility for ourselves and make those calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole argument in the Bhagavad Gita. What's the right thing to do in this situation? Do I go to war? Do I not? What's the right action? So, anyway, that's a
Did he go to war?
well, yeah. I mean, his family was within the war, so going to war would be, taking up arms against your family. So it's that age-old question of, what is the right thing to do?
Mm-hmm.
Going back to your question about, as teachers, what intention do we hold? Putting it back in the terms of the sutras and what Jonathan said earlier is I think really and truly the reduction of avidya. It is one of the definitions of avidya is that it's like a film keeping you from clear seeing. It's also covering you from your true self, right? So Desikachar says this, you hear it in a number of places in yoga, is the aim of yoga is to reduce avidya, to clear that away, to see more clearly. So when I'm teaching, it's within the context of postures and hopefully often pranayama and other technique. But I'm very clear it's not about the poses. And I get pretty down on the fact that it seems to be so much about the poses in America right now. And it's not about the poses. The poses are changing, our bodies are changing. My question is, am I helping to create a space for people to do really deep internal work and live better lives?
This is more a question for you, because it just occurred to me. There's children who are living in a stressful environment, and as children, they don't have the option and choice to change their environment. Are there tools and teachings that you give to them of how to live in stress? And is yoga one of those tools?
Yes, and it depends. It can look different than what we may do with adults. But often, one of the things that I go to for kids and for adults is just this idea of simple moving and breathing. Right? And Krishnamacharya talked about just the simple act of moving and breathing kind of being good for anything.
Kind of can't go wrong.
Right, bringing it together, right? And that just that is really powerful. So I may do something generally I like to do it standing, because standing is a little bit more of a powerful position. And if you're stressed and anxious, the idea of, okay,
factor.
let's just lie down and relax.
Right.
Sometimes they will feel more anxiousness or more,
Sure.
It's like I need to sometimes meet that charge with a charge, which is I may stand up.
Yeah.
I do like to use Anjali Mudra a lot. This idea of sealing in this one thought, or sealing in all thoughts in awareness. It's sometimes just if I have an intention, what I want to create in me, I can kind of seal that in here. I want to cultivate calmness. So everything that I do is going to support this idea of calmness, right? That's my sankalpa. And then I bring it together here. And I may just do some simple movement and coming down to the heart, or just taking the arms out and bringing the arms down. Not complicated, because if you complicate the movement, then I'm focused on, am I doing it right? If you teach somebody something that they kind of can't get wrong, then it's just about them bringing the movement and breath together, and then
present attention.
Yes, of course, and then they naturally start to calm down. And I've had some kids though that when they start breathing, they feel more anxious. In which cases, sometimes we do just even breath awareness. This idea of just receiving what's already there.
Right. Maybe
not
not
this idea of
controlling something.
yeah, and this idea of not adding
Mm-hmm,
something to what's going on, but subtracting, right? Just receiving what's already there, just listening, right? And you know, also in other cases, I say, well, what helps you? I love turning on loud music and dancing.
Good, if it
Great.
works.
If that
Right.
works, then who cares if it's yoga or not? Does it help them kind of calm the fluctuations of the mind?
And break,
Cool.
break through that
If it
moment.
does, then great. Or if it gives them some liberation from the, like who they are and who I'm gonna be and am
All
I
that
enough and
Chitta vritti.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I loved what you said earlier, because this is so relevant for me as a parent, and it comes to me to Ayurveda
Mhm.
about oftentimes when a parent comes to you with, you know, stress issues for their child, you first, instead of giving them a million things to do for the kid, you hone in on them.
Mm-hmm.
So talk more about that.
Yeah, it's been real interesting to be in rooms of parents, you know, 40, 50, 60 parents, and I start to talk off saying, okay, so what I'm not doing is this. I'm not going to give you this laundry list to give to your kids, but this is really about you. And when you're able to do your work, right, then also we talk about the parent-child dynamic, and especially in middle school and high school, this idea of being a consultant to your child rather than managing and controlling them. Again, not to say that boundaries aren't set, that's a
But
whole
at
other
that stage of
conversation.
development,
But to create empathy between them, to really allow and send the message that if you're my kid, that I trust that you can manage your thoughts and feelings. Now, you may need some help, and I'm happy to consult you, or also to get you some other help.
right?
But
I'm there
if
for
I
you.
keep coming in, right? If your life is like hitting the gas and I come in to hit the brake, right? You have to have the skill of hitting the brake.
Right.
So if I always do it, then you never
You're not
learn that,
helping them
and then
to-
you become anxious when you feel overstimulated. You don't know how to hit the brake, right?
Right.
So, and a lot of parents don't know how to hit their own brakes, or
Boy, isn't
you
that
know,
the
at
truth.
least not without road raging, right?
Right,
So,
right.
so you know, doing the work with them and giving them a path to be able to understand that, and it pulls them back from also kind of being over engaged with their child,
Yes,
and
yes.
sending the message, you know, hey, this is what I'm doing, and this is what's been really helpful for me. You know, are you wanting some support? No? Okay, fine. You know,
Do
but
you see a strong connection? I mean, I would imagine this is true between children that are having a lot of anxiety and the parents that are behaving and kind of acting out of a lot of
course.
anxiety. Like they're learning that.
of
They're-
course.
And there's an energetic communication of
course.
this is life.
Mm-hmm.
So are you able
It's
to
the modeling.
really...
It's the modeling piece.
Yeah.
So I brought that in before, and you know, if a parent is struggling with their own anxiety, which happens, and it's
Sure,
not
it's part of life
even that it's a problem, but if it's kind of being projected out onto the child, rather than that person being able to really do their work themselves, it's being projected out on the child. The child doesn't understand it. The parent is just projecting all their fears on the child, and the child feels unsafe. Okay, well, this is in a way an easy way to look at it, but not always an easy thing to fix, because there's a tricky dynamic.
Sure, between the parent and the...
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the yoga techniques that you have found? Are there a few, aside from the moving and breathing, that you have found to be really effective for
Sure.
adults?
Sure, yeah. So again, we want to meet that charge with a charge. So having some amount of moderate exertion is really good. So sometimes we look at, restorative yoga, that's nice. And it is nice. But again, going directly there
When you're in that sympathetic state, you can't...
may not work, right?
Right.
They just, you know, we as teachers have, all of us who have done a restorative class, and people walk out.
Yeah, like, I
Because
can't do this.
is too hard for me.
Yeah.
This is
I can't get
giving
still.
me anxiety. I can't
Yeah.
get still.
Yeah.
And it's a more subtle practice. So this idea of, as a teacher, to plan the class to go from moderate exertion, or giving someone individually this practice, towards more subtle, maybe moving more towards some restorative practice, towards some breathing.
Got it.
Right? And of course, this idea of lengthening the exhalation, is so important, because it's been proven that lengthening the exhalation allows that parasympathetic, that rest and digest response to kick in. And so that can be done in so many ways, right? It can be done in conjunction with forward folding, which now you're working with the diaphragm. It can be done by adding simple mantra, like a one-word mantra. So some of the words that have been used, this comes again through Krishnamacharya, are things like shanti, or peace. They're doing a forward fold, shanti, and really getting that exhalation. That way I'm not thinking about the breath so much.
Right.
Just working on...
It's happening.
Yes.
Plus the mantra.
And my favorite one is namaha. This idea of not mine. Right? These thoughts, these emotions, these things are coming up, not mine. Right? I don't have
That's
to own them.
Yes.
Right? And
they're happening, but they don't have to be mine.
that's right. So I get to use that. You know, I can even just be in hands and knees, just tabletop position, right? And take an inhalation, exhale back to child's pose, namaha, and getting that exhale out. And then maybe I even add namo, namaha. I bow to what's not mine. Even better.
Even more reverence.
Even more reverence. And which also brings in this idea of devotion, and even Ishvari Pranadhana, right? Of just letting go to the divine. And
something else.
that there's something
holding
else.
us.
And if that's too much for a student, even this idea of just letting go of expectations. Right?
Releasing control.
Releasing control. I just
Surrendering.
let go. I do my best and I let go of the rest. And then
Let me ask you guys as parents here, because you shared a story before we started this of your son, is it? And the bicycle crash. And that was the scary parent moment.
Yeah.
But I think for myself as a parent, like, what if my child wants to do squirrel suit flying? You know, which is incredibly dangerous. Looks incredibly fun too. How do I hold the space for that? So I guess what I'm wondering is there, well, especially you as the practice you have. So you had this anxiety, this fear, right?
I didn't have the fear. It just happened, and my child screamed as he hit this wall, and then I went, you know, something happened to me, that stress response, danger, something's not okay.
Yes.
We may have to go to the hospital, came up in me. And I felt my heart rate increase.
Sympathetic nervous
Yeah.
system, fight or flight.
But this is the, are you willing to have your son crash into the wall again, if that's his choice?
Well,
to take those
sure.
risks?
Isn't that age dependent?
Yeah, it again, I'm not going to invite him to crash into the wall. We're going to try and set the right conditions for safety for him to not do that, right? But if I also don't allow him to explore, and
It's a fine line, right?
it's a fine line.
There's
So
gonna
every
be some
parent is
bumps and
going to do
bruises.
something different, right? We're going to communicate. Some are going to be looser, right? And they may have more bumps and bruises, and some are going to keep them very sheltered. It's part of your own decision making as a parent to try to find a balance
Right.
point.
And is it possible to be like, okay, my child is going into this dangerous thing that they want to do. I know my anxiety is going to be raised, and that's life. Like, I'm going to live with, not give my anxiety to the child, but I'm supporting them, and I know that my anxiety is going to be here, and I'm going to learn to be okay with that.
It's the same thing. My son's still on his training wheels. That moment those training wheels come off, I'm going to have exactly what you're talking about. Maybe like running, you know, this, and I've seen him even with training wheels, the bike almost starts to go over, it's a little decline.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know that's going to happen, but do I need to allow him to do it? Of course. And will he fall off and scrape his elbow? And yes.
Yes.
Will he be wearing a helmet? Yes. So things like that. We try to create the right conditions, right?
But at
do it
some
on grass
point-
first before you're on the pavement. All these things that seem step by step
Yes.
intelligent in some way. It makes sense.
But at some point, they're going to be old enough, and this is kind of speaking to what you were saying earlier, teenagers, you know, they're going to have to make those choices for themselves, and we don't get to say. You know, once they're 18, if they want to do squirrel jumping, I mean, we can say, I don't like that, it scares me, I'm concerned. You can express your concerns, but hopefully we're helping them to be their own individuals, right? To make those decisions
Right.
for themselves.
So does your yoga practice support you as a parent to do the
Yes.
to hold that
Yes.
personal anxiety?
Yes, yes. I mean, I even find now, like, there's this tendency as I've gone 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, you know, they so quickly change, especially now with my 10-year-old. Like, I have to catch myself. No, I actually shouldn't do those things for her anymore. I need to encourage and support her, even if it goes badly. It's time for her to step up to the plate and take that responsibility on. Because I want her to gain those skills to do it herself. And if I'm still thinking she's in that realm of 6-year-old or whatever age that's not quite as competent, I'm inhibiting her growth. It's my job to pull away a little bit and allow her to. So isn't that parenting in a way, you know, from the beginning to the end? It's a slow, you know, gradual releasing of how much we're right there.
That's right. And
Because
if
they're
you,
their own people.
if you have this sense of that's the work that I need to do, right? Then you can use your yoga practice, the very beginning moments of your yoga practice, to again set that compass for the mind. Right? Okay, I'm going to do some movement in the body, but ultimately, okay, I'm going to work with fear, or I'm going to work with trusting rather than fearing. And there's my sankalpa. That is what is going to be the kind of central point here to everything I now do in my practice, because I know that that's what I need to learn right now. That's what I'm practicing for what? For the game, which is all of these things that are happening in our daily life.
Right.
So there's not this idea of like I go from my daily life into my yoga practice, and there I'm really focused and I'm really
And then I'm
connected.
a mess everywhere else.
And then and I it ends, and then I go back to kind of being a crazy person and just being all over the board.
Right.
So this idea of integration
Yes.
is huge.
Yes.
And it's wonderful that right now we're kind of getting to that point in this conversation to understand that what's it all for is to really integrate, my own body, mind, spirit, but also to integrate the work between what I'm doing in here and what's going on out there.
Yes.
And that is so key. And if we lose fact of that, then again, there's suffering. And maybe as often happens, sometimes I may do yoga and it reveals some work that I need to do.
Right.
Some psychological work. And if I don't do that, then I may feel fragmented. I may not know why I feel off all the time.
Yes.
So again, there's that integration of a mind-body practice and the inner psychological work. So this word is such a key thing and a key concept to understand, and to know that you'll get there, but it's not the immediate goal. Right, the immediate goal may be, okay, I need to do this. I need to do this.
Right, that
but then
moment to
eventually, there's this idea of bringing it together, and I think that that's part of development. You can't know that when you're 19 and starting the yoga practice.
No.
So many things are kind of coming out, but it's what you're eventually working towards.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, that really summarizes it. And it's a path, and hopefully a roadmap to starting to kind of dissect a little bit of some of the psychology in there, wherever we gained it along the way as human beings, and to integrate it, to really integrate. This is my work. I hope, as long as I'm alive, that I am challenging myself and growing as a human being, the internal work. Oh, how can I be better here? And how can I be more skillful here? Oh, now I'm 60 and this is what's in front of me, you know? Okay, this is my work, right? It's layered and ever evolving.
We don't know what's going to come up in our lives. And we don't know what, in a way, we may be forced to look at, work with, and try to integrate, not only to my experience of having to kind of manage the sensations, but also having to integrate that into my understanding of my relationship to the world. What does that mean? So it's a really big idea, and again, I think just keeping the practice consistent, having this thing I can always come back to, no matter how crazy life gets. I keep coming back to my practice. Right? That's the touchstone. And then again, I keep working to set that compass, and also to cleanse the body, to clear the body of that tension. Which brings me to one important piece, which is, if you're doing the practice, asana practice, this idea of checking into how is my mind, how is my body at the beginning of the practice, checking in somewhere in the middle of the practice, maybe even giving it a rating. We can, if it's helpful, why not? Sometimes it's just a quality, but maybe, what's my level of calmness, or agitation, however way you want to look at it. And then also looking at the end of the practice, taking that moment, noticing, okay, how is my body, how is my mind, right? How is my sense of connection? And you can see the shift. That way it's not so much of a mystery, but if you actually say, I'm going to keep checking in, not that it has to be this way, but if my practice is not dropping me off at a place where I feel more calm in my body or more calm in the mind,
more connected,
then
more
what
present.
am I doing? So if I'm doing a very fast vinyasa class and it's not doing that, then okay, maybe I need to look at that. If the class is too slow and somehow it makes me agitated, then maybe that's not what I need right now.
And also the big picture. Over time, what are the results of the way I'm practicing? Big picture. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up pretty quickly here. Any other points you want to drive home, or anything you want to conclude in our chat on yoga, stress, and anxiety?
Well, it's a big topic. We could go on here for a long time.
Yes.
And again, I think it's just to own our work, and then to understand that in some way I'm always reflecting it or offering it back to others in our life. Not telling you have to do your work, but I'm just allowing that, just modeling that. And if they're curious, wow, you seem really calm or centered, what are you doing? I'd be happy to share that with you. So I think that's an important piece. And I also just want to put out to whoever it is that may be watching this, that if anyone wants more information, you can always go to my website at marinstressanxietycenter.com, and there's some resources on there and ways to contact me as well to further this conversation.
Any upcoming events you want to announce, specific series or workshops or anything?
Yeah, it's the end of the year, so things are kind of, there's not too much on the calendar, but there'll be something coming up at Yoga Works in the, I guess, late winter, maybe early spring, around yoga for anxiety relief.
Excellent.
So that will be coming up.
That'll be posted.
That's in process right now.
Okay.
And this will be coming out January 1st, which is close enough. Is it true, this rumor you hear, the holidays really do up anxiety in people's lives?
I think everyone has to answer that for themselves.
Well, do you find from a business level,
But there's a charge to it. There's certain meaning around the holidays. Sometimes people have had family disappointments or losses, or it brings up certain things, or it brings up this idea of it has to be this thing. And so a lot of expectation about it. So if you can meet the holiday time, with
using
again this idea of Ishvari Pranadhana, as I'm going to just kind of try to surrender, let go of expectations a bit, and not that I'm thoughtless about it, right? But I do what I do, and then whatever it is, and hopefully I don't get too stressed out about it, and I can actually enjoy this time, because it's actually a special time, a time of self-reflection in a way, more than this time of real expansive celebration as sometimes it can seem like.
Well, thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, you guys.
Greg. Excellent stuff. And we'll do it another time. We'll keep going. Endless topic. Namaste.
Namaste.